So we're beginning here Parshas Noach on page 30. And it begins, as always, you don't really have to follow because most of our discussions will be outside, but you're welcome to. It begins, Elad told us Noach. These are the offspring of Noach. Noach ish tzadik tamim haya b'dorasav. Noach, who is he? He is a man who is righteous. He is complete within his generation. Es ha'elohim yisalech Noach. And with God, Noach walked. Okay? So these are the offspring of Noach. And then it tells you first who Noach is. So the first question that everyone asks is, if it says these are, it's like I go to meet you and I say, oh, it's nice to meet you, these are my children. Right? But that's not what it says. It says, these are the children of Noach. Then it says, Noach was a righteous man who was complete and walked with God. Right? It doesn't say anything about his children. The next sentence tells you about his children. Right? That Noach had 3 sons. So it should say really, well, we'd like to introduce you to Noach. Noach is a righteous man. He walks with God, and he has 3 sons. But instead they're telling you, these are the sons of Noach. Then it tells you who Noach is, and then it tells you the 3 sons in a different sentence. It's odd. Right? So the commentaries tell you that it's not odd at all. You have to understand what it means. When it tells you that these are the toldos, the offspring of Noach, it's true. The offspring of a person is their children. But also the offspring of a person are the good deeds that they do, because of the effect that those good deeds have. Just like a child will continue to affect the world, so too will your good deeds. So it says, these are the offspring of Noach. What is it? First thing, Noach was a righteous person who walked with God. That's telling you, that you want to know what came out of Noach? This is what came out of Noach. He was a righteous person. So a person needs to look in the same way at their good deeds. Whenever you do a good deed for someone, you help them, you do something for them, you give tzedakah, you participate. Anything that we do that's a mitzvah is like our offspring, because it is something that has an effect on the world, has an effect on us, and it continues even afterwards. You know, they always say that you can't take it with you. When we die, we can't. Right? You can't take your gold with you, but you can. Right? But you can take your good deeds with you. And this is also the idea of what comes from you, right? And that what comes from us are the good deeds that we do. They used to tell a joke that in heaven they don't take checks. There is one kind of check they take. That's a canceled check that was made out to charity. In other words, if you have a check that was made out of charity, so that's a merit for you. God says, oh, that's a mitzvah. That one I'll take. But you can't pay for your trip in heaven with a check. So then it goes on, V'yolish Noach shlosha banim. Noach had 3 sons. Who are they? Shem, Cham, and Yafes. So the names of these children were Shem, another one was Cham, another one was Yafes. Now we learn about the personalities of these children, together with some explicit statements about them later on, that their names are a perfect example of how a name of a person represents who they are. So we find now that the world is going to be inhabited by 3 people. Because first you had Adam and Eve, and they had their children, and then the world's going to be destroyed now. And after the world's destroyed, basically the generation of the children of Noach are going to be inheriting the world. They're taking over. So their personalities are going to be the personalities of all of the nations of the world. It's going to come from them, those 3. And those are Shem. So Shem means name, right? Name. What's your name? In Hebrew, you say, what's your Shem? So Shem is the person's name, and in Hebrew it describes the essence of the person. So here it's telling us that the person Shem is a person whose personality was such that he was a theologian, because we call God Hashem, the name, and therefore he's referring to him being a godly person, a person in search of God. Then Cham means hot. The word means hot. Something that's hot is Cham in modern Hebrew, in Torah Hebrew, and this Cham was a person who was governed by his emotions, and that his emotions were very hot, and that he was very well, not hot tempered, but also very sexually oriented, very base. You know, he was the type of a person who had a very strong animalistic side. He was a human, of course, but he had very strong animalistic drives. Then you have Yafes. Yafes comes from the root word of yafeh, nice. Something that's pretty. And he was the one that we understand that brought beauty and art, culture into the world. And you see by who the offsprings of these people are. Like Shem's offspring are the Jewish people that follow the way of God. Yafes is the Greeks. And the Greeks were well known for their influence in the arts and in building of statues and paintings and of theater and poetry and philosophy, and that's who they are. So then it basically tells us that the world was corrupt. And it says that the world became corrupt before God, and the world became totally corrupt, right? Full of destruction. And therefore Hashem looks at it and he sees that there's nothing that he can do at this point, so he's going to destroy the world and start over, and he tells Noah, you have to build this ark. Right? So a few things just before we go further. First thing, the commentaries tell us that Noah, when he had children, he was already 100 years old. He was 100 years old when he had his three children of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Right? Well, Avram was close about the same age as well. But so there's an interesting point about this that we should think about. You see, you realize Noah lived in a world where basically he was the only good person. Right? The whole world became corrupt. People spent everything in their lives was full of theft and inappropriate acts of intimacy and doing things that were incorrect. And Noah followed the way of God, and so he was a righteous person. And God actually tells him, "I'm going to destroy the world, but you are going to continue. You and your children and your family are going to continue, and you're going to repopulate the world. So we're going to make it a better world." And so he has to build this ark, and it takes a long period of time, and people are supposed to ask him, why are you building the ark? And he tells them it's because God's going to destroy the world so that the people would repent. Right? So you have this going on. Now here, you imagine all of the people in the world are having children, right? Like just like we do. They have children. All of these corrupt, evil people are having children. Noah, who's a righteous man, right, who is really following the way of God, he doesn't have any children. He doesn't have children until he's 100 years old. So the commentaries ask, why is that? So it says the following. It says, if Noah had children, and the children, when he was young, and they were affected by the environment, then they would be evil, and God would have to kill them. So that's not a very nice thing to do to a righteous person. So God made it that they wouldn't be born. So he said, then what about if Noah, who was a righteous man, he had children, he raised his children to be righteous, and the environment didn't affect them. So then why wouldn't God let him have children that were of that way? So the commentaries say that God would allow that. He would allow that. And that he wanted that there would be such a thing, that even if they were young. But the fact is that they were born young, the effect of the environment where they were with all the corruption would have been with them much longer, and there's a greater chance that they wouldn't become the people that they could. So he wanted them to wait. But if we look at this sort of in a philosophic question, and the question is, here you have one righteous person in the world. The whole world is corrupt. They all have the blessing of having children, and he doesn't have it. So you can imagine the corrupt people going to him and saying, Noah, what are you doing? And he says, I'm building an ark. God's going to destroy the world. Why? Because you all are so corrupt. If you repent, God won't destroy the world. And he says, if you're right, and God is so close to you, and you're so religious, why won't he let you have children? And why are bad things happening to you? You're the only righteous person in the world, and God won't let you have children. But we're having children. If we're so bad, why does God let us have children and you can't? Right? This is the famous point where somebody says, religious people, they're not so nice, they're not so great, they do all these things wrong. Right? Judaism doesn't give you any promises. Look, I have a religious friend and she died of cancer. I have a religious friend and look what he got himself arrested. Judaism doesn't give you any guarantees if you're a good person. Right? That's exactly what happens with Noah. Here Noah is the only righteous person in the whole world, and he doesn't have children. And the point is that they would raise that question, that they would say such a thing, because the idea was that God wanted the people to repent, to change, because they saw that it was the right thing to do. Because we know that when one becomes religious or one starts doing mitzvahs, there's no guarantee that you're going to have an easy life. And nobody ever says that. Nobody says that if you're religious, everything's going to be great. You can imagine, like, I get up in the morning, and I know that I have to pay a bill of $50,000 today. So I go to shul, I put on my tefillin, and I pray. And I take out my tefillin, and in the tefillin bag is $50,000. Why? Because I put my tefillin on today, and I prayed. So I did a mitzvah. God pays me for it. Shouldn't God give good things to people who do good things? Sure. But what happens when that happens? What happens is that the guy sitting next to me, sees that I got $50,000 for my tefillin. So the next day, what's he going to do? He's going to put his tefillin on because he wants $50,000, right? So now, when I put my tefillin on, I didn't know I was going to get it. When he puts his tefillin on, he knows he's going to get it. So which one of us is actually doing a good deed? So really, I'm doing the good deed. He's not. He's just found a formula to make money. But I'm putting on tefillin because it's the right thing to do. So if I make it so that every person who's religious suddenly has a wonderful life, then you become religious just so you should have a good life, not because it's the right thing. Right? Now, no one says that you should have a bad life for that reason, but to say that every person who's religious is going to have a wonderful, rosy, beautiful life in every way would be ridiculous, because the whole world would be thrown off kilter. You'd lose your free will. You'd no longer be able to choose to be religious or not. You'd say, I'm going to be religious because I want to be a millionaire. Without it, I won't be. So I'll be religious. And that's what was with Noah. If Noah had the ability to have children, the people would have looked and said, oh, Noah, look at you. You're so religious, and you're the only religious, righteous person in the world, and you don't have any children. You see, Judaism doesn't give you any guarantees. And that's true. It doesn't give us any guarantees. And that's a point that God wanted them to know. If you're going to follow the Torah, you're going to live a good life, a just life, a righteous life, it has to be because you choose to live that life. Not because there's an ulterior motive that you're going to make money, or that you're going to have children, or you're going to live long. But that's not the reason behind it. So that's why it is that God made it that Noah didn't have children until later in life. Really is the basis of it. So that's one of the important things to look at here. Now, as we go on, without going into each specific point, we see that Noah is told he should build this ark. I don't know if you saw recently on the internet, they're sending out pictures of a fellow in Europe who decided he was going to literally build the ark in his backyard based on all of the instructions he saw in the Torah. And someone sent it to me. They have this picture of this giant boat in a guy's backyard. Giant. I mean, it's the size of a football field. That's how big it is. And it's tall enough for a giraffe to stand in. So he actually has this in his yard, and people come from all over to see it. It was very interesting pictures. You actually see pictures of it in the email. Wow. So his job is to gather together all the species of the world, right? 2 of each one, male and female from each animal, or in some cases even more. It's like 7 pairs rather than 1, in order so that they should not become extinct. And then here we see a difference. God doesn't tell Noah that you should go out and get people, but he tells him you should get animals. And you think that if the world's going to be destroyed, what's the purpose of gathering the animals and not the people? So the point was well taken, is that human beings have free will. We can choose. We can choose to do what's right or what's wrong. Animals don't have that ability. Animals are hardwired to do the will of God. A dog does what a dog does, not because it chooses to. It does it because that's what it does. Like a dog is programmed what it likes to eat. And it doesn't choose what it likes to eat. It likes to eat what it's programmed. It does. Its intelligence, its loyalty, its ability to do certain things and other things is all hardwired. It's all what we call instinct. Instinct basically means that God put within the animal the ability to do what God wants it to do, and the inability to not do that. Right? And therefore an animal doesn't have freedom of choice. That's why if a dog bites somebody, you don't say that we're going to send him to jail to change the dog so that the dog won't bite people. The dog bites people because dogs bite people. Right? It's not evil. It's not choosing to do it. That's what dogs do. So you either can train the dog not to bite, but it's not evil because it bites. It has nothing to do with evil. It has no choice. But a human being, on the other hand, does. And here we see that God is clearly showing the difference between human beings and animals. By him allowing animals to live, even though the world was totally corrupt, is a statement that animals are not a part of this. The only entity that can choose to go against the will of God is the human being. No other entity can. So he wanted all those animals to continue, as Noah's job was to take care of them. And there are many interesting midrashim about what happens with them on the ark. And one of them is how he used to go and feed all the animals, and what was involved with feeding them. And it says that one time he got late, and he went to feed the animals, and the lion bit him because he didn't feed it quick enough. It was late, it was hungry. And so it seems that the commentary is telling you how ingracious this animal is. Here you have a lion whose life is saved by Noah, who's being taken care of by Noah. No effort on the side of the lion. He just sits there and he gets brought his food. And nevertheless, because he's not brought the food at the normal time, he bites Noah. Right? And you say that's such an ingratitude. It's such a thing. Here, you should realize it. The point is that it teaches us an important lesson about human nature, even though this is an animal, but human beings are the same way, is that when someone does something for you regularly, it becomes an expectation, right? Like, let's say at first, whoever gets up first in your house makes the coffee. Right? That's your job. Whoever it is. If you get up first, you make the coffee for everybody, and it's sitting in the pot, and if someone else gets up. So you decide, you know what, I'm going to be nice, I'm going to make the coffee, set it up at night, and I'll use the timer. So whoever gets up, it's already made for them. Right? So if you do that once, everybody thanks you. Do it twice, everyone thanks you. You do it 3 or 4 times, they expect you to do it now. Now the rule has changed. It's no longer the rule, whoever gets up first. Now the rule is you make the coffee. You do it the night before, and when I get up, the coffee will be ready for me. It has nothing to do with that. The rule has changed, right? This is also with the lion. The lion there is no expectation that Noah has to save the lion, and to take care of it, and to feed it. The fact that Noah is doing this is because God told him, but as far as the lion's concerned, it's basically Noah's doing it because he's being nice. Just like you make coffee, you're being nice. But after he does it a certain amount of times, human nature is, and animal nature in this case, is that it becomes an expectation. It's expected of you to do it now. And therefore, we presume that this is going to happen. And if you've done it every week, you're going to continue doing it every week. And because of it, we lose our sensitivity to appreciate what people do for us. For instance, we have the Ashkava Minyan. The Ashkava Minyan has every week a Kiddush. And as a part of their Kiddush is that they have chillet at their Kiddush. They have hot food at their Kiddush. The rest of the shul doesn't, but it's a small group, and they do it every week. And we don't pay for it. It's just done. How is it paid for? There's a woman every week who on her own says she's going to come in every Friday and she's going to make it. And she pays for it. It doesn't cost much, it's beans and things, but she's going to pay for it, and she's going to make it every week. Right? So that every Shabbos, when the guys come at 10 o'clock in the morning, they can have their stew, right? And their class. And now, 1 week she doesn't make it, so they complain to her. Why didn't you make it? What's wrong with you? Well, the fact is, what do you mean? Where were you last week when she had made it already 200 times? The last 3 years, she makes it every week. Why don't you say thank you to her for that? Well, because she does it every week, right? But she doesn't do it 1 week. But it's a kindness. It's not a job. It's not an expectation. But that's how we are. And therefore, when we're with somebody a lot, be it our spouse, be it a child, be it a parent, be it a relative, a close friend, after a while we start to forget to be able to speak to them and to remind them and to thank them for what it is that they do for us, because we get used to it. So someone who picks you up every week, somebody who takes you somewhere all the time, whatever it is, right? Somebody even who sends you money every week, right? Or you send money to them. There should never be an expectation. It always should be appreciated. We see this in the way God created the world. And it says that if you ask somebody, what's a miracle? So say a miracle is something that happens that's not according to the laws of nature, right? And it happens, at the right time, but it's not normal. So what is that like? Oh, let's say a miracle would be that, that I'm going to walk home and it's raining, and as soon as I walk outside, the rain stops wherever I'm walking. And there's no rain. But everywhere else there's rain. But where I'm walking, there's no rain. That's not normal. Normal is that it rains wherever you are too. But if it's not doing that, that's because it's a miracle. God's making a miracle for me. That's true. So why don't you tell me that the answer to the question is that rain is a miracle? Or the sun rising every day is a miracle. Or the sun setting every day is a miracle. Or the sun heating the world is a miracle. The reason is because it happens every day. Every day the sun rises. You get up in the morning, you look on your calendar, right? The sun will rise at 6:02. You look out, 6:02, the sun rises. You know it's going to rise. So therefore, it's not a miracle. The fact is, it is a miracle. It's a miracle you've gotten used to. And just like when a person does something for us, we get used to it. We don't appreciate it anymore, and it becomes an expectation. So too, when God does something for us, if He does something regularly, we no longer see it as an extraordinary act. It's just, this is what happens. This is normal. This is nature. That's just nature. But it's not nature. The Talmud tells us that God constantly does things to cause us, right, to exist. In other words, The fact that the world exists, the fact that the sun rises, is not because God said, I want the sun to rise every day, and it just does it. God is conscious of the sun rising. He has it in his mind. I want the sun to rise. As long as he's thinking about it, it'll happen. Which means that it's not just set into motion a million years ago. It is a miracle because he's conscious of it all the time. And it's the same idea. So on the one hand, we have to understand that we have to appreciate the actions of God in the world and how things happen, and that nothing should be expected. Everything is miraculous. Everything is special. Everything is done with God's forethought. That just doesn't just happen. And when we're dealing with people, it's the same thing. We don't just get used to what they do. We have to show our appreciation for what they do. And just because they've done it 100 times does not mean that they're going to do it 101 times. The fact that they do it that one extra time beyond the 100 is something that we should appreciate each time, and we should let people know. Doesn't mean that you have to be all gushy and tell them every time, but you certainly should let people know. It lets them realize that you appreciate what they're doing, even though they do it every week for all these years. Okay? That's just a point that we see from here. Yes?
Sorry. No, you brought a point up, I never thought of it, but all these years, and I thought, I'm thinking, why did he, like you said, why did he want animals? Like, I mean, there's some animals we used to eat, but not many, so why did he want all the animals?
Well, we understand that in the creations of the world that God made, that if you study whatever it is, you find out a purpose for it. It's very rare that you could actually have an entity in the world that has no purpose. Like, we don't like spiders, but spiders eat mosquitoes, right? Okay, so that's a good purpose, right? Other animals eat spiders. There's all different purposes for different entities, and that if one of them wouldn't exist, like, let's say worms. Like, I have a friend, I haven't seen her for a long time, but she has an extraordinary fear of worms. When it rains out, she doesn't like to walk because there's worms and it bothers her, right? It's not so uncommon, I'm told. So there should be no worms. Well, the fact is, the worms are one of the things that makes it a lot easier for things to grow, because by them going through the dirt, it aerates the dirt, causes the dirt to be richer, and therefore things will grow better. Right? The point is the same thing with waste. Right? Waste from animals fertilizes the ground, causes everything to grow better. So all of these things that we think that may have no purpose, all have a purpose. We just don't necessarily know them. So when God did that, we don't necessarily know. But for all we know, that one of those animals that he had Noah save, 5,000 years later, we may be studying them and they give us the cure for leukemia. Who knows? Right? But the fact is, we have never found one that doesn't have a purpose. So that's really the idea. Now, when Noah gets to the end of the 40 days of being in the flood, right, I'm on page 37, and starts talking about the waters fading. So Noah says it must be time for us to get out. So he wants to find out. So he sends out this raven, right, this blackbird. He wants the blackbird to go and see, right? And it says, so it says that he sent out the raven, and it kept going and returning until the waters dried from the earth. Then he sent out a dove. So the commentaries all ask about this, him sending out this raven. It goes and it comes back, and it goes and it comes back. Why is it doing this? So it says that the raven thought that Noah was sending him out so he should die. Because Noah wanted him to drown, because Noah wanted to run off with his wife. That's what the Midrash says, right? Remember, Midrash does not have to be literally true. Midrash is to teach us a lesson, and they say it in these ways in order for us to remember them. So the fact that the bird says, I'm not going to go, Noah is like a hitman. He wants me he's going to send me out there, I'm going to drown, and then my wife's going to have no husband, a bird, right? And he's going to marry the bird. He's going to take the bird, take my wife. So they say that's why he would go out and come back and go out and come back, because he kept coming to make sure that Noah wasn't taking his wife, and he was afraid. So people say, well, this is a ridiculous medrash. Who would think, should believe that a bird would think such a thing, right? And that there's a possibility that Noah would do that. The point is, it makes no difference. Nobody says that a medrash is actually true, right? It doesn't have to be literally true. And even if it would be literally true, it's a bird, right? The birds I don't know what birds think. But in any case, the purpose of the Medrash is to tell us an interesting point, which is that no matter how absurd it is, if you have a negative feeling about somebody, distrust about someone, if you've heard bad things about that person, it's hard to get past it. Right? As illogical as it is, you see that with racism. I find often that when somebody is even if they're not even an open racist, they know it's not good, but they have racist tendencies, and they meet a person from whatever race or religion it is that they have a problem with, they'll always say the same thing to them: is that you're different. Oh, you're not like the other ones. You're different. Why is it? Because they're not different. They're the only ones you know, and they're real people with likes and dislikes and nice things and bad things about them, and that's just how they are. By you being a racist, you're putting them all into one thing, and you're saying they're all like this, right? Or all Jews are like this, all blacks are like this, all Puerto Ricans are like this, and it's not true, right? It's not true. You're making a certain presumption, and then you're saying that that's the case. The raven himself. Right? One of the things that the Gemara tells us about a raven is a raven does not practice monogamy. It does not have one spouse forever. It has whoever it has, right? So if he's that way, the raven, right, doesn't care who its wife is. It has different women, different times. So he thinks that all men are like that. So Noach must be like that too. But Noach has a rule. He has to get married. He can't marry a woman who's already married, so he's going to kill me. Right? So what is he doing? He's projecting his own flaw in other people. And this is another message, something that we learn from here, is that we often have these feelings about other people, of how they are, that they're bad, there's something negative about them. And really, we often have to look into it, and we often find out that the flaw that we think that they have is actually a flaw that we have, and that we're projecting it to somebody else. Because let's say imagine if I'm a con man. Right? My job is trying to convince you to give me your money for investments, but there is no investments. I'm going to keep the money, right? I'm going to try to trick you. So when I'm dealing with people who I don't know, I'm going to presume that they're also con men. I'm not going to believe them. Why? Because I'm that way, so I'm going to think you're that way too. So when you come to tell me, yes, I got this great investment, so I was, this guy's a con man. He's just trying to steal my money from me. Why? Because that's how I am. Right? So the raven was like that. The raven had no desire to stay with a wife. So he thinks everybody is like that. Right? He wants every man wants to take another man's wife and doesn't care about his wife. It's not true. But it shows us sometimes about how we are when we project. So very often when you find that another person really bothers you because you think they're dishonest, or you think that they're this way or that way, sometimes if we look within ourselves, we find that flaw. And that's why it bothers us so much when others are that way. Because we have that flaw in ourselves. And very often it turns out that they didn't have the flaw at all. It was really us projecting on others. Because sometimes it's a good way of being able to see ourselves. Because it's a very difficult, we always say that people are very self-aware. They don't really know who they are. People who, for instance, I sing horribly. I know I sing horribly, but I only know it because people tell me. As far as I'm concerned, I sing like Caruso. I sing great. I can sing as good as any chassan in the world, as far as I'm concerned, because it sounds good to me, right? But I know I don't sing it. I objectively know that I sing poorly. I subjectively think I sing great. Right? But I objectively know that I don't. And every once in a while I'll sing and I'll say, that sounded good. I must be getting better. And then somebody will tell me, how can you do that? You're embarrassing yourself. But I keep trying to tell myself, I've found out how to sing good now. I'm going to do it that way. I'm going to sing this way or this way. But it never works. I'm too it's not that important that I would take lessons. Maybe that would help me, but certainly not this. It's the same idea. Right? You can't often see the flaws within yourself, and sometimes by seeing the flaw in someone else, all we're doing is like God's holding a mirror up to us and saying, take a look in yourself and see if you see this. You can see it in someone else easily. See if you have that. And often it's a message to us that we do, and that's they say that's why that medrash is there, to tell us that point. Not that the raven actually necessarily said that. Okay, so now. God, beginning on 41, tells Noach it's time to go out of the ark. He says, "Send me the table, go out of the ark." Now the commentators ask first, why does he say go out of the ark? I mean, he's only in the ark because he has to be. As soon as there's no more water, he's going to go out of the ark. Why does he tell him, go out of the ark? Right? In other words, if I say to you, we're going to have a conference for 3 days, come stay in this hotel for 3 days. When the 3 days is over, I don't have to tell you go home. You know you go home. There's no more water. The world is fine. So come out of the ark. You have to live in the world. So it says that God had to tell him. And this is a lesson, the commentaries say, for derech eretz, for how a person should act. Because when you're the guest of someone, right, it says that you should not take anything for granted, and you should always wait to be invited. So if someone tells you, I want you to come, somebody tells you want this, you want that, you always should wait, because that's the appropriate way. So even if it says, God says, you go into the ark, so I'm his guest in the ark, now he says, now you should go out of the ark. You shouldn't leave without permission. Like we used to say in yeshiva that a guy would come to yeshiva and then he'd want to go home for vacation, let's say Hanukkah. So he would go to the rabbi and he'd say, I'd like to go home for a vacation. And the rabbi thinks about it. Is it good for him to go now? Is it the appropriate time? But the reality is the guy's already got his plane ticket in his back pocket. He's ready to go. He's leaving. He's just fulfilling a formality. The rabbi's really not answering the question, because no matter what he says, the guy's leaving. He bought the ticket. The point is that that's really not the appropriate way of doing things. We always should make sure that we are a guest of somebody's, or we are a member of something, or participating in something. Whatever it is that we do, even if it seems logical, we should do with the permission of the host or the person in charge. That's not because you have to, because that's the way a sophisticated, genteel person does things. It's the appropriate way. It's manners. It's called derech eretz. Derech eretz is really, it has within it manners, how you should act. Okay, so that's one of the things it says. Now, on 43, we find that Noah has come out, and it says here, and he comes out with his sons, and it says that Noah, the man of the earth, debased himself and planted a vineyard. So it says Noah, who before was called a righteous man who walked with God, is now called a man of the earth. This is the last line on 43. And what does he do? Is he debases himself. Debasing means he lowered himself. Right? He was a high spiritual person, and he lowered himself like an animal. To debase a person's self, right? A person who eats too much debases himself. A person who's too involved in sexuality debases themselves. Right? So the physical things. He debased himself, and he planted a vineyard. So what it's telling you is that his planting of the vineyard was somehow a form of debasing himself. Well, what does he do? He comes out of the ark, and he plants a vineyard. And then he grew the grapes, he made wine, he got drunk. That's what it says right here in this line, he got drunk. And that's considered debasing himself. So the Medrash tells us, the Gemara says it as well, that Noah was a person of privilege. And how is that? Is that he saw three worlds. He saw the world as it existed before the flood. He saw the world as it existed during the flood, and he saw the world as it existed after the flood. Right? Now, that's not much different than a person who went through the Holocaust. A person who goes through the Holocaust is a person who, on the one hand, saw what the world was like before the war. What it was like for the Jews in Europe. Then they went through the war. They saw what happened. Right? And then after the war, they see the new world and what's going on. All right, so that's like Noah, right? Same kind of thing. And so you imagine a person goes through the Holocaust. They come out of the Holocaust, right? And they decide they're going to open up a wine company. That's what he did. He opened up a vineyard, the first thing. And it doesn't say that he became not religious, and it doesn't say he was evil. It says that he debased himself. That is, that he did something that he really shouldn't have done. It means that he wasn't thinking in the appropriate manner. What is that? When you think a guy who went through what he went through, a person who went through the Holocaust, it's time for him to get something. Like, he's had a terrible time. He saw the world what it was like. He went through all these years of where he's going to be killed, and now he wants to take it easy a little. He wants to get drunk. He wants to do something, right? It's not forbidden. Like, why do we take such a harsh look at that? So the point is that we understand that there are terrible things that happen to people, and that people go through hard times, and that but a person needs to have the right outlook. And you have to say, now that it's in a new world, what am I going to do to make this new world better than the old world? What am I going to do to make this new world a better place, that those things won't happen again? How can I improve the world, improve people? That by doing this, right, getting oneself drunk so you can't do anything is not the way. So the Torah is not telling you that Noah was bad. It's telling you he made a bad choice. Right? That's what it's saying. That's why it used a word that's not so harsh, that he debased himself. He was on a high spiritual level, and he made the mistake that he went down. Because instead of saying, okay, I'm in this new world, let's make this world a perfect world, he goes out and he says, I can't handle it. This is too hard. It was too much pain. Look what I went through. And he goes and he gets drunk. And that's not the right response. The second answer to the same question is, during the flood, Noah took care of all the animals. He spent all of his time giving. He took care of them, he washed them, he cleaned them, he took care of them medically, he fed them, he cleaned up after them. Whatever the animals did, it was his job to take care of them. And he did it for 40 days and 40 nights, all he ever did with all of these animals. He was a giver. Right? He sustained their lives, right, because of him. So that's all he did. And that was a very high level, right? A person who dedicates himself to life, to everything in the world, that it should live. And that's all he did was give. That's everything he did. He gave, and he took care of, and he did everything. It says that if he truly was a giver, and truly he was sustaining the world, then when he came out of the flood, then the first thing he should do is he should plant food. He should plant things that people need and animals need to live. Because the 40 days are over, we're going to run out of food. Let's go plant wheat. Let's plant apples. Let's plant something that's going to grow fast, that people have food to eat. But he didn't. He planted wine, grapes, so you can have wine. He got drunk. You're not going to drink wine because it'll nourish you. Right? The idea is that it showed us a little bit about his character. He was, you'd say, a tzaddik, an environmental tzaddik, that he was a tzaddik, he was righteous, because the environment around him was such, he was considered righteous. In the boat, for 40 days, he had to take care of the animals, he took care of the animals. But was that really him? Well, as soon as he didn't have to do it, we see that it wasn't. And that's why it says he was debased. Because first you look at Noah as this high spiritual person who took care of the whole world. The whole world is being sustained by Noah. The first opportunity he has to do something different, he does. So therefore you see that it's not really the essence of who he was. Yes, he was great, but perhaps he was only great in comparison to the people he lived with. Because the people he lived with were pretty bad. And here we see that even though he was a giver, and he gets the merit for being a giver, it was only because the situation was such that he had to do it. But afterwards, where the situation is that he could choose to do anything, he didn't continue doing it. He went and he made wine. So that's one of the commentaries say is why it says that he debased himself. Now, the whole story that comes up next is what happens when he gets drunk. Right? It's starting on that line and going through the next page. And what basically happens is that he's laying down dead drunk on the ground. And it says that in the last line, he became drunk, and he uncovered himself within his tent. So as drunks do, they're not thinking straight, and he's naked in his tent. Now Ham is his grandson. Ham is his son, who is the father of Canaan, who will be his grandson, saw his father's nakedness. You imagine Ham walks by, and remember Ham is the one who is very animalistic, right? That's the name Hot. Right? He sees his father laying naked, and he goes and he goes to his brothers who don't see his father naked, and he tells them, guess what? Dad's drunk, and he's laying in the tent naked. You got to see this. So it says, and Shem and Japheth took a garment. So Shem and Japheth, they take clothing, take a blanket, and they laid it upon their shoulders. They put it on their shoulders, and they walked backwards into the room, so they wouldn't see their father naked. They didn't want to embarrass him, and then they covered them up, right? So, and that way they wouldn't see it. So Noah wakes up and he realizes what happened, right? And he curses his son, Ham, and the other two he gives various blessings depending on how they acted. So clearly more went on than simply he saw him. A father doesn't curse his son because he saw him naked when it's the father's fault that he saw him naked. The commentaries say that there could have been a number of things he did. One of them, it says that he castrated his father because he didn't want there to be any more children. Because the more children, the less he'd inherit. Right now there's only 3 children. They each get a third of the world. He has another child, they'll get a quarter. Another one's a fifth. So they say, one of the commentaries says that he castrated his father. Another one is that he had homosexual act with him because he was animalistic. He was hot. He was uncontrollable, and he acted in that way. But clearly, by the reaction of the father, for his son seeing him, it doesn't make sense. It had to be more than that he just saw him, right? So the commentaries who want to minimize it say that really simply because he embarrassed his father by going out to the brothers and saying, take a look at him, Look at it, he's dead drunk, naked, laying on the ground. Right? That's enough to embarrass his father. That's enough reason for him to be cursed, and nothing else happened. That could be, none of these necessarily all have to have happened in such a manner. But the point is that he's cursed because of it. But we see from here a very interesting thing from the curse. The curse is that it says that Ham, right, he has a son named Canaan, and Canaan is a slave of slaves to his brothers. Then it says, blessed is Hashem, the God of shame. So blessed is shame's God. That's the one God, right? And Canaan will be a slave to shame. So that means that in a perfect world, those people who are the followers of God will have the people of Ham there to assist them, to take care of their physical needs, so the world can be brought to perfection. And then it says, may God exalt Yafes, but he will dwell in the tents of shame. So here it says that Yafes, who, remember how it worked, Ham saw his father naked, and he ridicules him. Therefore he's cursed. He will be a servant. Shem and Yafes walk in. Now according to the Medrash, Shem walked in backwards, and Yafes walked in forwards. And then he saw his brother turned around, so he also turned around. But the point is that Shem, because of his understanding, did not want to see his father naked. Yafes had a desire to see his father naked because he's beauty, he's art. The human body is beautiful, but when he saw that it wasn't right, he turned around. So therefore, Shem receives the biggest blessing. Yafes receives a blessing, but only if he allows himself to be with Shem. So his blessing is that he's subjugated to Shem, and Ham is left off as the servant to all of these people. The point being is that if you let us postulate. From Yafes comes the Greek Empire. Now we know is the case. The Greeks who basically took beauty, took everything of beauty, and they made it godly. They raised it up. Now they turned it into God. Right? They became perverted because everything had to do with beauty. Everything was aesthetics. So they did all types of things for pleasure, all types of things for beauty, but not necessarily what's right. They just did what they felt was beautiful. If you can take their idea of beauty and you attach it to theology, to the belief in one God that Shem represented, so that's the ability of taking beauty and art and combining it with truth, and then you can have beautiful, beautiful things in the pursuit of godliness. So you have a beautiful temple, you have a beautiful esrog, you have a beautiful challah cover. You take things that are used for ritual purposes for the pursuit of God and becoming close to God, and you add beauty to it. So beauty on its own can be destructive, but beauty tempered by godliness and discipline is very good. So as long as Yafes works together with Shem, then they work together very well. When the Greeks went out on their own, they ended up destroying themselves. They ended up because they became so perverted. But a time would come when they work together with the Jewish people, who are the offspring of Shem, then the world will become a beautiful world with the pursuit of godliness. Ham, on his own, is very dangerous because he's animalistic. He's only interested in what feels good now. And on his own, he's going to destroy the world. But if he would subjugate himself to the other two, and in other words, take the leadership of the other two, then the world can come to completion. Because he also has a job. His job is to make sure that the world runs, that there's food for people, that there's electricity, that there's homes, and all the things that you need in the world. Ham's job would be to have, so that all three of them could work together to create one entity, which is the world as we see it. Right? That's really how they put it. Yeah.
I mean, you said that his family was after that took care of the other.
They were cursed that they should do that. They didn't necessarily do it.
Like the children and children.
Correct.
So that's what I was wondering. Why is it like if one person is like bad or immoral, like that?
It's going to carry on?
Yeah.
So it's not really like that, because you're seeing it as a
like
punishment. It's not really a punishment, it's a description. Here you have his personality traits in this person, Ham, which is that he's extremely animalistic, he often can't control himself, he wants to have relations now with whoever he wants to have it with, he wants to eat now, whatever it is that's going to make him feel good. That's how he is, right? That's personality. So that is a spiritual genetic reality in his offspring. Some will have it more, some will have it less, but they all have it.
They can argue that, like Noah was a righteous man. He's the father.
Right.
So he had 3 children.
Correct.
Right?
So they all had some of the personality traits of Noah.
Why, like, like the father was righteous, and so the sons should be right. Even though,
no, righteousness is based on your own acts. Like you could have a righteous parents and you not be righteous, or you could have evil parents and you could be righteous. Righteousness is based on your acts. What you inherit is your environmental and your genetic disposition. Right now, with what your parents gave you, you can now choose to be righteous or not. Your parents were very smart. They gave you the ability to be very smart. Right? Your parents were very, let's say, they were very loose when it came to the way they acted. You were raised that way. You'll think it's okay. Now, when you get older, you have to make choices. Those choices are what determines if you're righteous or not. Right? It's based on who you are, how you look, where you live, the environment, your friends, your genetic disposition, your nature and nurture, all combined within you. Now you have to choose. How am I going to use what I have for good? That makes you righteous. So Noah had children which carried on, each one of them carried on some parts of him. But they started to split off, just like Yaakov and Esau, Yitzchak and Ishmael. The Torah is very black and white when it describes them. Yeah. They weren't so simple. They're very complicated people, just like we are. But within them were these traits. So if the offspring of Ham have these traits, now how do they use them for good? So the way they use them for good is by allowing themselves to be assistants to shame, because shame will lead them in the right path. I allow myself to work together with shame to follow the goals that he sets as sort of the leader. I will have my role, and therefore I'm doing what's right in the world. I'm making the world a better place. The person who literally hands out the food to the poor person in Africa is doing a good deed, right? Yeah. The person who goes to work to raise the money to buy the food, right? That person is also a good deed. The person who ships the food is doing a good deed. So each one is doing a good deed, but each one's doing something that fits who they are. One person is wealthy, he gives the money. Another person is a baker, he bakes the food. Another person drives a truck, he drives it. So everyone has their job. You can drive a truck to deliver guns, and you can deliver bread. That's your choice, right? But the fact that you are a good driver or you enjoy driving, that was not necessarily your choice. That's something that is who you are. That's the idea here. So all of these people are who they are. The question is now, how are they going to use it to become closer or to get further? And so Noah is saying, this is how, if you want to make the world a perfect world, you have to make Shem on the top. You're going to have Yafes come in and work with him to make everything beautiful and attractive and interesting. And Ham will be the one who does all of the work around that to make it possible. He'll build the factory so that the food can be made. Yafes will make sure that the food looks nice so the people will want to eat it, and Shem will make sure that it's being distributed in an honest way. And that's how it's understood. I just want, since we only have 5 minutes, I just wanted to get to the end of this section, just to talk about the Tower of Babel, Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel is a very interesting thing. It's so really find it. It's on page 49, section 11. So the Tower of Babel, it says that all these people got together and they said, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them in fire." Right? And the bricks served them a stone, and they built up, and they said, "Let us build a city and a tower with a top in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed across the whole earth." So why are these people building a tower? Because they don't want to be dispersed. They want that people should all live together. Right? They should live together. Otherwise, we're not going to, this tower is going to be the central point that we'll all gather around. We're building that tower. Now, some say they built the tower to go to war with God. Right? And you can see that in the words. The idea being is that they saw that God destroyed the world with the story of Noah. Just happened, right? If God gets mad at us, he's going to destroy us. So we're going to make this tower that we have a name, and we can now we can now like have a dialogue with God. Right? Whatever the point was, is that they saw this as good. We're doing this for good. That's why we're building this tower, for the sake of good. Now it tells us that when the people were building the tower, it just says that if somebody would die, like building the tower, that nobody really cared. But if somebody dropped a brick and it broke, everybody would cry. And it says because bricks were hard to get, but people there were lots of. Now, the point is that if the reason that you're building this tower is so that is for the betterment of people, that we should all be together, living together as one, and not allow God to destroy us, right, is for the best. So then why would it be that if somebody died building the tower, you wouldn't be upset? The whole reason you're building the tower is to help people. So you tell me that, well, there's so many people, it doesn't matter if one dies. But you're doing it for people, right? It doesn't make sense. You're going to tell me I'm doing this to make money, and somebody dies, all right, but I'm doing it to make money. Somebody died, that's how it is. But I'm not. I'm doing this to help people. And in my building of it, I'm hurting people. Right? That's what's happening. And I don't care. So then are you really doing it to help people? So that's the point that comes out. So they say a very interesting thing. This is a very early example of somebody who does something good, but does it in a bad way. And this is a very common thing. It's like the guy who decides it's almost Shabbos, and he has to buy flowers for his wife for Shabbos. So he's going to drive his car over here to Sue's, then he's going to park right in front of Sue's. And while he does that, because of how the parking lot is, no one can get in or out, because his car is right there. And this happens all the time, right? But he says, I'm only going to go in for a minute, and I'm doing a mitzvah. I'm buying flowers for my wife for Shabbos. If I park over there, I might not be in time. I got to go fast, so I go in. Right? Because of it, you've got 20 cars lined up who can't get out. They can't get home now. They can't bring their wife the flowers or whatever it is that they had, and they parked correctly because this guy did this. So is he doing a good deed? Yeah. Is he doing it in a good way? No. He's not doing it in a good way. He's doing it in a harmful way. No. The idea that a person can do a good deed in a harmful way is very possible. Right? I want to build a beautiful shul, and you know what? You don't fit. You don't fit in my shul. Now, so I can hurt your feelings, because I want to build a shul that helps people. That doesn't make sense, right? I'm going to hurt someone in order to make a good place. The idea is that not only should the end be good, but the way you get there has to be good. You can't run a charity on stolen money. Right? You say, well, I didn't steal the money. You can't do it. Someone steals money, you can't use that for good purposes. Right? It's not done. The means are not justified by the end. Right? The end is the end, and even the means have to be good. So, like they used to say that when they would build a shul in Europe, that they used to be very sure that nothing put into that shul was stolen, not a nail. Everything had to be honestly done, and everyone who worked had to be paid, because you wanted that the shul should be built with honesty. You want to build a good thing, then it has to be done in a good way. Everything that you do. Now, it's an extremely important point, because we often find occasions in our own lives where we'll rationalize doing something wrong because the purpose is, in the end, is good. And that should never be done. And that's what they were doing. They said, we're building this tower in order to help people. Oh, someone died? All right, but it's for helping people. The idea is that our goal, if some bad things happen along the way, it happens. That doesn't ever work. You have to make sure that when you do something good, the way you do it is good. You want to buy flowers, you have to make sure you don't block people. You want to, it's like, I have a yort site. Let's say I have a yort site. I want to lead the davening. Another guy has a yort site. So we'll get into a fist fight. Who gets to lead the davening? Who gets to lead the service? Because I have a yort site and he has a yort site. Well, nobody said that it's so important that you should have a fight with somebody that you should lead the service. So your way of leading the service, right, is you're doing a good deed by doing a very bad thing. So that's what this teaches us, that you can't do that. That's why the Tower of Babel was considered bad. It was wrong. It was a wrong thing to do. And that's a person needs to keep that in mind. You're not allowed to do a mitzvah by doing it at the expense of someone else or hurting someone else. And that's what it tells you right away in the beginning of the Torah. And you're going to see this throughout the Torah and throughout things that we do in our own lives. So we have to make sure that we do that.
They're not changing all different languages.
Yeah, that was part of the curse, that they changed the language at the end. Because they wanted to be unified, so God dispersed them by changing their language. Says, you did this in such a bad way, I'm not going to allow you to continue.